What's up, everyone? Welcome back to TwistBase. Today we're gonna look into something new, something we haven't really done before, and it is a challenge, a coding challenge, and it's something I found recently on Dribble. If you don't know Dribble is something where a lot of talented designers share their work, and I found something really cool related we could build in Flutter, and that's exactly what we're gonna do. But before we even continue, I want you guys to subscribe to my channel and like the video if it has any benefit for your projects. So, what is the challenge gonna be like? The challenge is gonna be this. So going to Dribble, I found this really cool example where from Cuberto, which is a team that does really cool UI stuff on Dribble. And what they do here is like a really cool page transitioning when you tap the button and you got this weird kind of effect happening, and it looks like it looks very simple at first, but then if you look closer to it, what happens in the middle is actually quite complex because there's like two spheres to it, like the inverted one and the normal one. And yeah, this is the effect we're going to recreate it today. So let's start right away. Okay, guys. So if you've opened the starter project and you run it, you're going to see something really cool, which is a black container. So let's remove this and create our home view class, which at the moment it doesn't exist yet, but we will create it in the home view.dart. Let's create a stateful widget because we are going to create an animation controller and we need to dispose those. The reason why we're not using an animated container, for example, is that I found that it was giving issues with the bounding box. So if you're doing like if the animation is going out of the bounding of the out of the screen resolution, it was giving some issues to me. So I'm gonna do this from scratch to give you also some more flexibility. You just need to make sure you dispose and you create an init method like this. So let's create the home view class. That's fine. Let's import material so these errors go away. Then if you put Control O in here, you can specify the init state methods. Make sure to super init state like this. Go outside of this scope. Then if you press Control O again, you can look for the dispose methods. I mean, you can type this manually, but these are just short keys I find really useful. And then super.dispose. So at the top of our home view state, we're going to add in these variables. And we will have one animation controller that basically controls everything. We're going to have 3 different kinds of animations, which is the start animation when the sphere is growing. I can show you now. So the start animation would be when the animation is half, right? When it's fully entering the screen, because remember we are going to use an inverted one when it hits the half of the screen. And then we got a horizontal animation, which is responsible for bringing the dot back to the center position. As you see here, there's a little movement on the x-axis, and that's why we will have 3 animations. And then there's still a page controller, which is responsible for moving stuff on the page, which is page 1, page 2, page 3, which is just boilerplate, but you can place in any content you want. Going to the init state methods, let's initialize our page controller to start with. Let's also initialize our animation controller, which is specified duration of 750 milliseconds. Note that if you need to specify the vsync at this, but this doesn't work because we need to extend, because we need to add the widths and then ticker provider state mixin. If you are using just one animation, you can use single ticker provider state mixin, but because we are combining and we're going to use staggered animation, we need to use ticker provider state mixing, which allows you to do multiple animation in one go. Moving on. Specifying our start animation, which has a parent of the animation controller. This is the stuff where we add our intervals. You can see it like a keyframe. We're putting a keyframe at the middle of the animation, which would be the half of our 750. This is where our first animation is happening, which is called the start animation. This is where we also specify a curve. and this is going to be very important. You will see later on. Then specifying our end animation, which is a similar approach, exactly the same, only it starts at the middle, sorry, and ends at the fully end of our animation. And finally, our last animation, which is called the horizontal animation, is also going to be of type curved animation, and it's gonna. I was playing around with these values, but again, we can play with this later on when we actually can see something on the screen. But this is the main setup for now. Then, coming up, we also need to specify a status listener for our animation controller, which is going to determine, you can check for the status, which comes with the status listener, and you can check whether our animation status is completed. Then in your model, which we still have to create, we can swap colors. The logic for this I'm going to explain in a bit. And we need to reset the animation controller, so when we tap again, the same thing happens without having to reverse the animation, because we're only doing forward animation. Notice that I'm using the ... syntax. This is cool because now we can also add another listener, not a status listener, but just a listener as well that gets updated on the frame and not just when a status finishes. So let's do that as well. So adding that, we're adding the listener, similar with the ... syntax. Cool, and that's everything for our init state method. So next up, let's solve the provider stuff in our home model class. Also, guys, the logic behind this in here is this is basically just saying, because we are in a listener and it's continuously updating, we can check whether our animation is halfway, and that's in our model. We are setting this halfway boolean to true, and I'll show you why in a bit as well. So let's go to our home model.dart file. So the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure we can set and get our index, and that the notify list, and that all the listeners get notified, so they update as well. Next up is our boolean to keep track of, is the animation halfway. Similar approach. Let's also create a boolean to keep track of whether or not the button, or when the button is toggled and when it's not toggled. We can do this to use to switch between colors. So let's, for example, the first screen is going to be the inverted color of the next screen. That's one way of doing this. Let's also make sure we are able to get and set a background color, but also a foreground color. These colors are currently linked to a palette, an array which specified in the global methods, and I'm specifying them in the model so we can swap them around and they get updated on the UI as well. And then lastly, our method to swap the colors, which is, it's very simple. It just mixes the indexes of the array. Nothing really special happening here. So that's for now. We'll explain it in a bit as well if you don't fully understand what's going on, but it's just checking when you first toggle it, and then when you go to the next screen, it's switching the colors around. So background becomes foreground and foreground becomes background. Let's go back to our home view.dart file, which is our main file. And let's see, in our build methods, we're going to specify 3 variables, which is one is our model. Let's also import the provider package, and let's also import our home model, like so. We need this because we want to align the button in the center of the screen, but also give a padding all the way at the bottom. So I'm doing this like this. It's a media query, which always is the result of the width and the height, the actual width of the height of your current screen. For me, it's an iPhone 8, but for you, it might be something different. And then let's create the root of our application, which is going to be a scaffold. And as you know, every scaffold will have a body. And for us, this body is going to be a stack. And that stack is going to take multiple children. And we're going to specify those now. The first child is going to be a container. This is some color checking we need to do. That's why we specified is halfway. I'm gonna copy this color and also add a background color for the main scaffolds. And Let's copy this and let's remove the color here, the comma here as well. Let's see, let's import our global shared folder. So these arrows are also away. So what's going on really in a nutshell, this is just specifying the width, because what I'm doing here at this container, let's go back to the example. If you see here, you're gonna see this. You see where when the circle is almost at the middle of the screen, I'll show it in a different way. So if I'm copying the video address, I'm going here, I'm playing this, so I can pause it, and now you can see. So right here, right? So I'm creating this container. This will be one container. This will be another container. And then we got the main backgrounds. And why? You're going to see that in a bit. So that's why we are using the screen width of the screen. We're going to divide it by 2 minus the radius of the sphere, divide that by 2 as well, which will result in somewhere around here. And that's going to be the first one in the stack. Then the second thing in the stack is going to be a transform. And this is actually going to translate. You can use identity, and then we can translate, which is actually going to be positioning that sphere in the center of the screen. And you can do that if you want to do this manually by the screen width property divided by 2, and then also the half of the radius, which is going to place the sphere exactly in the center. And we can use that to place the sphere around here. You can create the screen height minus the radius and minus some bottom padding you can give it to place it like you can see around here in the screen. That said, remember, because we're going to click it and we're not using a button or something, we need to add or wrap our stack in a gesture detector, like so. And let's add the onTap methods for now. So what's going to happen exactly in the onTap methods? Firstly, we need to check whenever the animation status is different to forward. And I'm doing this, for example, when the user presses, for example, 2 times on the button, you don't want this to run 2 times. So you can only click when the animation is not in the process of animating. First thing we're doing is we're setting the is toggled to the opposite of is toggled. So we can use this to specify the colors for each screen. So you want to invert the color all the time. Then we're updating the index. Make sure that the index doesn't gets resetted as well. So this is just resetting the index back to null. And here you can see our page controller, which is a page view that is saying like page 1, page 2, page 3. It's animating this to the page with our index. We just set it. You can specify duration and the curve of this as well. And if all that's cool, we will forward the animation. You can put forward animation also outside of this scope, but it's better to just call it once whenever you need it. Going to our stack in here, our nested stack, this is actually where the magic is going to happen, and we need to specify the first animated circle. This is where we actually going to pass in our animation, and for this one it's going to be the start animation, which means, and I'll show you now, if you see when the user first steps this, so this bit, this will be the start animation starting from here and ending right in the middle. That's the animated circle. We still need to create this class, but we'll do it in a sec. And then we specify the color. I'm just gonna specify a flip, which means the value can either be 1 or -1, and that will perform a sort of horizontal flip, because the way I'm approaching this is that this part of the screen is following the same logic, only that it's flipped, you can see. And I'm also not going to use we're not going to clip or not using a clip mask, because I believe if you don't use a clip mask and you can do it with stacks, just do it with stacks, because clipping just adds another level of complexity to it. Okay, adding the next item, the next animated circle, you're gonna see there's some new, more optional properties we can specify, and that is because our second animated circle also has a horizontal tween, which is gonna move, and I'll show you again. When this animation almost finishes, we're gonna see that the sphere is also moving in the X direction to reposition the sphere again exactly in the center. And this is an optional tween, which you don't need to specify. All the rest are required properties, which you're gonna see in a bit when I'm gonna create the class. And you can see we flip this here and we have a different, always the opposite background color. So let's go all the way at the top and create the class we want to create. And for now, we can create a stateless widget. We're going to call this animated circle. And for now, it will just return a container. But we don't want to extend from a stateless widget. We want to extend this class from an animated widgets. Then let's create our properties that are going to live inside this class. And we will see we're going to create the tween, which is the main tween, the horizontal tween, our main animation, and our horizontal animation. Then also the flip, which is 1 or -1, and then also the color specified. Next up, let's set up our constructor for the class. And this is going to take the required, so you can see there's 4 properties that are required, which is the root animation, the color, the flip value, and the tween. I'm also asserting, making sure that the user passes, or you can only pass 1 or -1. This is actually really handy when you're fixing a bug. Let's say I'm using this class and I'm calling anything on this. Sometimes it's really hard to find what is actually going wrong with your app. So in this case, this assert is really handy. A requirement for listening to your animation is you need to specify listenable. You can see when I'm removing this, it's gonna give not an error, but a listenable is required alert, basically. So let's keep that in mind. Okay, let's update this container here. And for now, we still need to provide our provider in here. So let's do that as well. So we got final model is provider dot off. And after the off, remember we are, you can specify the type, and then we are passing in our context as so. This resolved the error. Quick explanation. This is, remember, this is going to be the sphere. We are using a container, and then we are using the half of the radius to create a perfect sphere, right? For the border radius. I'm also a bit animating you're going to see, to make the transition a bit more smoother, I'm animating the border radius as well. Because as you notice, when you scale up a sphere, it's never gonna fully be a rectangle, right? So you need to fake it a little bit, and you don't see it that much, but it makes the result a little bit more smooth. And then we have an icon. I'm here just using a ternary operator, checking whether or not I'm using the flip one or the normal one, and if that's so, we're swapping the keyboard arrow right or keyboard arrow left because we flipped it. Then this is basically checking whether or not you're using an even number. If the index is even, this will result in a white color, otherwise a medium blue color, which is specified in our global class. Now, coming next, let's wrap our container in a transform property. And also let's specify the transform required value. And this is going to take matrix identity. And this is going to check for this is going to be responsible for the horizontal animation. That's why I'm checking here whenever it's not null. Remember, because this one was not a required property on the class. And this is going to do the horizontal animation only for the second animation and not for the first, which is going to result in a null. Then let's wrap this transform property in another transform property, which is going to do the main part of the app. So in here, we are doing the main scale thing. Again, we're using the tween we passed in. We're going to evaluate the animation, and we multiply this by flip. This is going to be multiplied by either times 1, which is going to result in the same, or -1, which is going to perform a horizontal flip, because remember, this is actually our x, and this is actually our y value, right? And then also very important, we need to set the alignment to a fractional offset dot center left. And the reason why we're doing this is, if you're looking at the example again, you can see the sphere is scaling when you tap it from the center left. If you would do nothing, it's gonna just the sphere is just gonna scale from the center, and that's not what we want in this case. Okay, so the final thing we need to do is we need to add our page views. Let's go all the way at the bottom of our stack. So we have this. Let's find where we need to put this. So I'm assuming this is gonna be right here, because this is the main transform. Let's go underneath here, and let's paste our main page view builder in here. What's happening here? Remember, we specify the page controller in here, which is going to be here. This is hard-coded. I mean, it doesn't really matter for now, because we're not focusing on this. We're focusing on the actual animation. We're going to have 4 pages. Then this is going to take in our item builder. We have a centered aligned text, and then our page is going to be +1 of the index. So this, otherwise it would say page 0, 1, 2, 3, but instead we want page 1, 2, 3, 4. Then, and here you can see our, this is going to result in a, whatever's even is going to have a medium blue color, and whatever's not even is going to have a white color. And the font size, which is quite big. The only thing we still need to do, let's wrap our page view builder in a ignored pointer, because remember, this is all the way at the top of the stack, and we don't want any pointer events on this, so we set ignoring to true. So that's it, and now the moment of truth. Let's do our fingers crossed and do a hot restart to see what's happening. We have this, and there we go. That's that. So I'll just highlight some bits that I didn't really fully go over with. And let's start with, for example, let's see. I mentioned somewhere in the beginning how important, it's going to be somewhere here, in our initState method, how important these ease curves are. And let's say if for example, I change this to a normal ease here, and then we hot restart the app, you're going to see like this is going to be completely different. Like there's I mean, not completely different, but you see it's not very smooth. And I was getting the result, and I was just playing around with the curves. I mean, you can change this, play around with this as well, but for me, this was actually the best result. If you're messing around with this, I found like if changing this to 2 seconds, and if you want to make it as smooth as possible, if you now click on this, we can see if you can make it smooth around here, you can play it faster. So I did this to check whether or not my values are quite correct, or if it's not correct at all. But let's keep this back to 750. Again, this is a lot of trial and error, and I found this solution the best at the moment. So let's see what else is going on. So when it's completed, we're swapping the colors and we are resetting the animation. If you want to check this, if this actually works, I can show you here. Let's say, okay, we are halfway. And now you're going to see how this actually checking for the halfway. Right here, and see, this is getting updated every frame for now in the halfway. So that's that. Let's remove this. I think that makes sense. Then disposing, oh yeah, we still need to dispose our controller, so let's add that as well. The animation controller dot dispose, cool, like so. So I explained everything in here, that's fine. That should be fine as well. Oh yeah, one thing I wanted to show you guys as well. Let's say, for example, so you guys understand what the logic behind this is. If I'm using, let's remove this ternary operator, and let's, for example, just use our background color, and then in here as well. You can see why I'm doing this ternary operator, or why I'm checking for the halfway. So if I click on this now, you see what's happening. There's this weird thing and it's not flicking when it's half. Let's put this back. Let's hot restart. You see that here? This is the trick I was doing, and that's why I'm checking for halfway. So this is actually something you don't really see, and it's actually quite of a hack away, but it's a solution. I mean, I've done this similar thing in After Effects, and always for these kind of stuff, you need to like mess around with it and find a solution. Well, yeah, that's all there is to it, really. I really like these kind of ternary stuff, like where you can check on the fly. Why I'm doing this is because, remember, one icon is flipped, and these are actually the same because one is flipped and one is not. Because if I wouldn't do this, for example, let's say I'm just gonna remove this just to see how these work. Oh, sorry, let's put a comma here as well. So what's gonna happen now? It's flipped. You see that little flip? And that's why I'm doing this in here. So in case you don't wonder, I mean, yeah, that was it. You can see like there's probably another few other ways of doing this, and bear in mind if you're doing like this custom kind of transitioning, most of the things are going to depend on your timings. Like, remember when we were using the curves and how we're using them and how we stagger the animations. So if you change those, like it might look completely different. And if you're familiar with, for example, After Effects, it's a similar kind of approach where you would animate something from A to B and then B to C, pick it up, make the transition as smooth as possible. So it's a bit of a trial and error thing. There's no perfect solution for this. This is just my approach of doing this. Feel free to, I mean, if you prefer another solution, go for that. The only thing that matters, in my opinion, is that the end result is looking good.